So now we're up to Daf Ches Amid Beis. Lo zu kedosha b'zu. According to Rab Chanina, lo zu kedosha b'lo zu. Right, a mincha can only be subject to kiddush if it's got all its three ingredients. That means the flour, the oil, and the levona. With Rab Chanina, isaron lama nimshach. Okay, here's a whole girsa problem, but let's say the purpose of taking a kli and doing mashicha on the kli is in order to be makadish the kli. Why do you need that? Since the special kli for measuring out the isaron, that's why there's kiddush. But according to Reb Chanina, wait a minute, you can't be makadish flour on its own because Reb Chanina maintains that you need all three ingredients. So Gemara answers the minchas chote, because minchas chote is pure flour without any addition of neither oil nor levona. Frek the Gemara v'log lama nimshach. Why did they do a mashiach on the log vessel? In other words, it was used exclusively for measuring the shemen. And Reb Chanina holds that you cannot be makadish the shemen on its own. And where is the log shel mitzorah, because there the shemen stands on its own. Now the Gemara wants to say that according to Rav, that you can be makadish the flour on its own. Why? Because we have Menachos where there is no addition of levona or shemen, and now we're going to bring a raya from Shmuel that Shmuel also holds like Rav. V'av Shmuel savalei karav disnam. We learned in the Mishnah in Zvachim kli. Oh, so now the question is: there's liquids and there's solids. So kli halach, a kli that's used for measuring fluids, liquids. Mekachin is halach. Midos, hayovesh, mekach hayovesh. You have measuring kalim that are used to measure solids, and that's what it's used for. But ein klei alach mekach hayovesh, v'lo midos hayovesh mekach halach. V'yomer Shmuel lo shanu ela midos. That's with regard to measuring either for fluids or for solids. Avol mizrakos. Now we have the mizrak, which was the kli that was used by the Kohen to be makabel adam. Is makachos es hayovesh, even though the dam is a liquid, but you can use that mizrak to be makadosh a solid. Shenemar shneim maleim solis blula b'shem lemincha. So now we're talking about the silver bowls, and both of them, the Torah says, were filled with fine flour mixed with oil for a mincha. So now we're assuming that the flour is dry, and yet we're going to use these silver bowls that are mizrakos, that are used for dam, which is a liquid, for kiddush of something solid, the flour in the case of a mincha. And that will support Rav's view that you could be makadesh flour on its own. Amalei Rav Achmi Divtu Ravina. Gemara says that the pasuk itself does not really support Shmuel's conclusion. Mincha lachahi. What are you talking about? Mincha is mixed with shemen, and therefore it's a liquid. So what are you telling me that you could be makadosh in a kli that's designated for liquids? You could be makadosh something solid. What are you talking about? The mincha is not solid. It's not dry. Malay, it's all relative. Oh, no, two answers. I jumped the gun. So the first answer, the Gemara, is liyave shabbat. Right? When you mix oil with flour, inevitably there'll be pockets of flour that did not mix with the oil, and they are dry. And the very fact that you can Mekadesh that in a Mizrach proves that even though the Mizrach is designated for liquids, it could be used to be Mekadesh something that's solid, that's dry. It's all relative. If you compare the mincha, which again, it has some mixture element of liquidity, if there's such a word, but nevertheless, if you compare it to dam, it's really a solid. And yet, we use these silver bowls, these basins, these mizrakos, and we were able to sanctify the mincha. Now, even though these mizrakos were designated for use for a liquid, namely for dam, but nevertheless, the basin has the capacity to sanctify the dense mixture of flour and oil. Dense meaning it's almost dry. Presumably, it has the capacity to sanctify even a pure solid. Gufa, we learned, Amar Abulazar, Mincha shekmatza behechal kshera, shekematzina v'siluk bezichin. And we said that siluk bezichin is equal to what? To kmitza, and therefore, just like siluk bezichin is in the hechal, so too you could achieve kmitza of a mincha in the hechal. Moshe Rabbi Yirmiyah raises the following objection based on a brisa. The Torah says v'kamatz misham. We had this Gemara already. This is a repeat. V'kamatz misham. So what does it mean, misham, that the kmitza is from there? What is it referring to? So we say, mimakom sheragle azar omdos, right? When you came in from the eastern side into the Azara, there were 11 amos, which is called the Ezras Yisrael, where the non-Kohanim would go in to the Azara, and that's where you did the Kmitza. But anyway, it's saying that the Kmitza is in the Azara, not in the Heichal. So now we have a little bit of a digression before the Gemara is going to answer this question and defend Rabbi Elazar. The Gemara says, Ben Beseira Omer Minayin Shem Komatz B'Smol Sheyachzir V'Yikmotz B'Yamin Tamalom V'Komatz Misham Mimakom Shekomatz Kvar. Okay, you were at the cemetery when we discussed this yesterday, and that is that on Daf Zayin, the Gemara establishes, according to Ben Beseira, that if he went ahead and he did the Kmitza with his left hand, he can put back the komets and into the kli, and then repeat the kmitza. This time, get it right with his right hand. And how do we know this? The komets misham mimakom shekomets kfar. Okay, we discussed this yesterday. Ika diamri. Now the Gemara has to get back to Rabbi Elazar and defend Rabbi Elazar from the kasha that was raised by Rabbi Yirmiyah, which mimakom miragle hazar omdos, that kmitza is only in the azara, not in the heichal, and the Gemara offers two answers. Ika diamri hu mosif. I'm sorry, not two answers, but two traditions of the transmission. According to the first tradition, who most of Rabbi Yirmiyah himself answered his question. Ika diamri, according to the second tradition, it was Rabbi Yaakov who answered it to Rabbi Yirmiyah. And what was the answer? Oh, and then there's another opinion that Rabbi Yaakov said to Yirmiyah about Tachlif. Anyway, Asbel, let me explain this to you. And he says the following: Lo nitzcha ela hachshir es kol azara kul. Right, the brisa, when it quotes the pasuk v'komatz misham, is indicating that the kmitz could take place anywhere in the azara. Why do I need a pasuk for that? Why would I think that kmitza can only take place in one part of the azara? That's what the next sugya is all about. Shlo Tomer, according to one opinion, I would have thought, Holvi Ola Kochi Kochi Mincha Kochi Kochim, Ma Ola Tu'unetzafon, Af Mincha Tu'unetzafon. So the Torah has to add V'kometz Misham to teach us that the entire Azara is kosher, even the Darom, and you don't need the Tzafon, even though Menachos are Kochi Kochim. So now, if we need the pasuk lafuke from Ola and Safon, then the pasuk is not excluding Heichal. And that's how we defend Rabbi Elazar, who says that the Kmitza could take place in the Heichal. So Gemara says, what do you mean? You can't derive conclusions from Ola to Menachos. Ola is much more chomer than Menachos. Mala Ola shekain kolil. It's completely burnt. A mincha, after the Kmitza, the Shirayim are eaten by the Kohen. Mechatos. So let's try to see if we can derive conclusions about Safon from Chatos, which is Kodesh Kodeshim, and has to be shechted in the Tzafon. The Gemara says, no, Malach Chatos shekain mechaperes al chai v'krisus. Mincha is usually brought as an adova. There's no chayve krisus, but a chatos means that you ate dam, you ate chaylev, but shogeg and had a bin b'beis you be chayv karetz. So the Torah is very machmir on chatos, upgrading it to the status of requiring shchita in the tzafon. I would never entertain the possibility that we could derive an analogy to menachos. Oh, so Gemara says, wait a minute, me'asham. You know what? Asham also requires tzafon. It's also kodesh kodeshim, and yet it's not like the case of Ola, which is kulei kolil, and it's not like a chatos, which is only which has the amazing power to be mechaper on a chayve krisus. No, mala asham shekei minei domim. We cannot derive menachos from zvachim because it's minei zvach, minei dam. As the Gemara is going to point out, once you have this answer, then you don't even have to give the answers that you gave for Ola, that it's kulei kolil or chatas because it's a chayve krisus. Mikula nami, even if you want to have a tzad shava and every one of the pirchas you're going to remove, but shekei minei dam, but they're all minei damim, and a mincha is not damim. And if that be the case, we certainly would not derive the requirement of tzafon in menachos from zvachim. So we still have to understand, why do we need the kamatz misham? Ela itzrich sal kedaitcha mina hoil uksib ve'kriva el hakohen v'gisha el hamizbeach v'kamatz. So now we're talking about v'higisha, and we're talking about v'hikriva, and then the last word in the pasuk is v'kamatz. So the hakrava and the agasha is being equated with the kmitza. So if you bring the mincha, you equate bringing the mincha with the kmitza. And ma hagasha b'keren dromis ma'ravis. Okay, the agasha has to be on the southwestern corner of the mizbeach. Af kmitza nami b'keren dromis ma'ravis. Because of this equation between hagasha and kmitza, we're going to derive halacha of dromis ma'ravis. And if that be the case, then kmitza would be limited not to tzafon, like we said until now, that we got rid of, but it would be limited to the southwestern part of the Azara. And therefore we need a pasuk of a kamatz misham to teach us no, that you can do the kmitza anywhere in the Azar Gufa. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shlamim sheshchaton beheichal ksherim. How does Rabbi Yochanan know that if you shechted the shlamim inside the heichal, it's kosher kshenema ushchato pesach ol moed? Yeah, but pesach ol moed is only referring to the Azara. So how do you know anything about the heichal? Lo tehei tafel cham v'neika, right? If you can be you could be shochet the shlamim in the Azar, then how much more so in the heichal, because you're upgrading it to a higher kedusha. Meisvei, I don't get it. I don't understand the logical analysis of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseiro Minayin. Okay, now we get into some painful stuff. Shem hekifu of the kachomes Azara, right? The goyim are shooting at the kohanim in the Azara. Shakonim nichnosim leheichal. V'ochlim v'kodshei kodshim u'shyarim menachos. And they're eating from kodshei kodshim and the shyarim of menachos inside the heichal. Why? Only because there's very shasat chak, where the goyim are what should I say, surrounding and sieging the Azor. Talmud Lomar, we'll take a look here at the beginning of Daf Tes, the Kodesh Kadoshim Tochlenu, that the pasuk says, referring to the Heichal, and that's called the Kodesh Kadoshim Tochlenu, and that's the heter for eating the the food of the what should we call it, right? In the Heichal. Affecting marvel lomali klar lema b'chatzar ol mod yochlenu v'lo yehi tafel chav. According to your logic, Rabbi Yochanan, why do I need a pasuk to teach me that the achila of kodshim of kodesh kadoshim can take place in the heichal? Why do I need that for? Why not just derive from a kal v'chomer? If in kodesh kodshim we eat the let's say the basar or the what do you call it, the shiraim of the mincha in the azar, then how much more so you could eat it in the kodesh kadashim? And this is where we'll stop for today, even though we're sort of like in the middle, but we'll pick it up from Yitzchak tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think we get an earlier time period. Is that correct?
Yeah, tomorrow, 9:30.
9:30. Okay, then. So let me wish you a Rosh Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov.
And we'll see each other tomorrow morning.